So the Israelis yesterday started putting out threats against Iranian journalists and specifically the Iranian state broadcasters. And then let's go to A11, guys. We can put these just horrifying and extraordinary images up on the screen. While this woman is broadcasting live, you can see her here talking, they attack the building that she's in. And shortly thereafter, actually, incredibly, she and her colleague there come back on air and are able to, talk presumably about what unfolded. But I mean, this is the sort of thing, Saagar, that's just like normalized. I mean, the number of journalists that they murdered in Gaza with scarcely a word, by the way, outside of Trey Yingst of Fox News from Western media about the targeted assassinations of journalists inside of Gaza. And now you have this, they announced that they were going to attack this broadcaster. They did it while they're live on air. And again, silence from any sort of, the Western media who supposedly care so much about journalism. We just put A12 up on the screen so you can see what I'm talking about here in terms of the threat. They say, will the Iranian regime's television stations be attacked soon? Defense Minister Katz, the mouthpiece of Iranian propaganda and incitement, is on its way to disappearing. So they don't even feel the need to pretend that this was an accident or they were going after military targets. They're just happy to announce it directly, blatant war crime, and put the next piece up on the screen. Afterwards, they confirmed. They said the same defense minister says the Iranian regime's propaganda and incitement broadcasting authority was attacked by the IDF. So just out and out admitting it was them. After this all unfolded, the Iranians decided that they would go ahead and then threaten some of the Israeli propaganda channels. We could put this up on the screen. Channel 12 and Channel 13. Or it says, evacuate the headquarters of Channel 12 and 14, Israeli channels 12 and 14. Immediately, this was Iran in Arabic account on Platform X issuing this warning message. As far as I know, nothing happened at those stations, but just unbelievable the impunity that the Israelis act with at this point. I mean, there's just no previous norm or law of war that they respect whatsoever. They've detonated car bombs in Tehran, brag about that as well. The pager attack, which maimed and killed innocent people who happened to be nearby. People were going about they were at the market or whatever when these things blew up. There was all sorts of collateral damage, and they bragged about that. They're super proud of it. They killed a bunch of the assassinations that they were able to accomplish here in this war that they started to begin with. Those things, they were assassinated in their beds at their homes, which means that their wives, their children, their neighbors were also killed. The civilian death toll is at some 90% is the estimate right now. And so there's just no limit because they've been allowed to act with such impunity and with zero accountability from the world.
Right, and the justification is, it's state broadcasting, it's part of the propaganda. And it's like, well, okay, anybody who has ever studied a regime change operation or coup, in Africa, this is one of those classic things. What is the first thing that the rebels always want to do? You seize state broadcasting and the ability of the regime to be able to get its message out there. So even, let's just say purely on strategic grounds, what does this indicate? This ain't about no nuclear weapons program. This is about what?
You think that lady was a nuclear scientist?
This ain't about nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
This is about regime change. This is about degrading the ability to get the message out. This is about reducing their state capacity to trying to foment chaos. There's so much Israeli cope online about how these Iranians are just, screaming out for freedom and for lack of repression.
They'll be greeted as liberators.
I'm not going to doubt that there are a lot of Iranians who are upset with the regime, but even today I was looking where some of the most prominent Iranian activists against the regime are you, Donald Trump and Bibi, not only, killing civilians or whatever and causing chaos in Tehran, but this whole evacuate Tehran order is one of the most unhuman things that we've ever seen in terms of chaos, just think about if somebody told you need to, that message was posted 2:30 a.m. Tehran time. Similarly, we have what? The inevitable. We were told repeatedly, Israel will finish the job on its own. We're not asking anything from the United States. Then slowly it was, okay, well, we just need you to defend us, but we'll keep going offensively. And now, here we have Yoav Gallant. He's the former Minister of Defense for Bibi Netanyahu, presided over much of the Gaza war. Goes on CNN, of course. These guys never know how to do an interview with their own television networks. And what does he say? He says America has an obligation to actually enter the war offensively and to take out Iran. Let's take a listen.
I believe that the United States of America and the President of the United States have an obligation to make sure that the region is going to a positive way and that the world is free from Iran that possess nuclear weapon in the middle of the richest place in oil and gas in the world. This could be a disaster for the world. And I believe that the determination of the American president that have been shown recently will pave the way to America to enter into this very important operation. The President of the United States have the option to change the Middle East and influence the war and influence the world, not only the war, in order to do something that will create a better future for all of us.
America has an obligation. So there you have it. I mean, these people are shameless. They will say that they're doing it all themselves, and now they've basically spent the last 5 days just begging for U.S. involvement. And in a sense, as you said, they actually created the crisis which would necessitate, quote unquote, U.S. intervention. Because if the Iranians are like, screw it, okay, let's sprint to the bomb, then what? There's only one force in the world that can take them out. They went into the operation knowing from day one they would never be able to destroy the Iranian nuclear facilities. They could degrade it, that's not the same thing. And at this point, also, if the U.S. position is basically zero nuclear weapons, again, it's very difficult to square. If you're the Iranians, and this is where you need strategic empathy, I'm not, in any way sympathetic or whatever to the Iranian regime. I'm going to try and put myself in their shoes. If you have the entire higher echelon of military command assassinated, if you negotiated and thought they were serious and then they used that as cover to bomb you, why would you, what would you do? And in a sense too, from this point forward, as we learned with Libya, if you give up your nukes, they may still take you out a decade from now. So why would you do it?
That's right.
You would not do it. I would say sprint to a nuke and let's fight to the death. I mean, look, it's grim. Don't get me wrong, but this is where also people talk about the ideology, that there's ideology baked into that as well, right? And be like, look, this is a final face-off between us and the evil West, and so be it. Millions will die. Look at the Hitlerian bunker theory, or the way that the Japanese high command is willing to sacrifice their own civilians. And by the way, you didn't see mass rise up against them because the uncomfortable and truth is that unconditional surrender set the conditions in which the people accepted their own death trap, and they themselves said, okay, this is it. We will join the regime, even though we hate them on these various things, to fight them. I'm not saying that's necessarily going to happen, but it's very, very, very possible. That's the biggest problem with all of it.
I mean, Trita Parsi says that there has been a real rally around the flag effect in Iran.
Imagine somebody bombs you. What are you going to do?
Of course.
If somebody bombed us, I'd be like, okay.
Threatens all, however many million people in New York City. Like, of course, you're going to think of for those of you who are old enough to remember, the patriotic fervor after 9/11. Right? I mean, the country really did, the number of people who signed up for the military and bought into the propaganda about why we have to go into it was off the charts. And so, yes, of course, there's going to be a rally around the flag effect as you have the Israelis bombing them and the U.S. threatening them and involved in the bombing. And so you are actually forging a much more cohesive nation and much more support for a government that by all accounts was pretty unpopular at this point. And in terms of the logic with regard to nukes, they have to be thinking like, shit, we should never have even negotiated with Obama. We should have just gone for it. We should have just gone ahead because we wouldn't feel so comfortable messing with them now, and the Israelis would not feel so comfortable messing with them now. That is the logic that our foreign policy has created. And it was entirely predictable, and in fact, I know the Israelis understood this going in, that counter to their narrative that their attacks and their degrading of Iranian nuclear facilities and also, going after military and political leadership and their attacks now on oil and energy infrastructure and all the rest, far from limiting their nuclear capacity or degrading the calculus or the desire to rush towards a nuclear weapon, they knew going in that the logic would be, all right, well, now we have to go after a nuke. And that's exactly why they did it, because they knew that they had to block this diplomacy that was ongoing before it actually succeeded. And this is their big chance to create a dynamic where they have leverage with us to try to pressure us into this war. And it looks very grim in terms of Trump buying into that logic and getting played and going all along with them. And that is not to, by the way, take away his agency, because nothing drives me more crazy than all of this cope about like, oh, he's being misled by the neocons. No, he's a big boy. It's very clearly him making these decisions, and he is the reason why we are in the position that we are in right now.
Yeah, and if you want the blackest of all pills, let's go ahead and put A10 up there on the screen. Quote, this is the latest poll, just came out yesterday from Gray House. By the way, we don't know a ton about this, but this is the only polling that we really have, this organization. Do you support the U.S. attacking Iran if necessary? Now, I think if necessary is important, but this is amongst Trump 2024 voters. Yes, 72%. No, 19%.
Yeah, no, it'll be overwhelming. From the Republican base, it will be overwhelming.
And honestly,
overwhelming support, it will be.
I question whether there will be some Democrats too, because this is one where I think that the Democratic base will be against it.
Yeah.
But there's no Democratic leadership against the war right now. In a way, their silence is nothing. Their silence speaks volumes.
They've been pathetic.
Yeah.
I mean, they're more, listen, I thought the thing that happened with Alex Padilla was bad.
Right.
Going to freaking war with Iran is way worse.
Oh, yeah.
And they were so much more exercised over, him being wrestled to the ground after he tried to, ask a question of Kristi Noem at a press conference. Again, that was bad. Potential World War III is worse, okay? Vastly worse. And the silence is absolutely deafening. I do want one little glimmer of positivity here. You have some bipartisan effort to put forward a war powers resolution to say basically like, hey, you can't do this. You can't enter a war with Iran without getting the backing of Congress. And so you had Tim Kaine in the Senate, along with, here's the full list. This is as of 10:30 p.m. last night. You have Tim Kaine, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Jeff Merkley, Chris Van Hollen, Ed Markey, Tammy Baldwin, and Tina Smith. So all Democrats only in the Senate. In the House, you do have Thomas Massie, the lone Republican who has signed on for a similar war powers resolution, along with Ro Khanna, Rashida Tlaib, AOC. That's all we got so far.
Yeah.
So pretty slim pickings. There are a handful of Democrats. Tim Kaine was pretty early to come out and say this is unacceptable. Bernie Sanders has been probably the most vocal, AOC signing on. But you're absolutely right that it's so enraging that you have this moment when the president is contemplating dragging us in to this horrifying war at great cost and risk to our people, to regional stability, to civilians and human life in and around Iran. And there is just very little opposition being mounted from the supposed opposition party. It is utterly pathetic.
Look, I'm going to say something unpopular, but I think it's just basically true at this point. MAGA, they're going to support Trump no matter what. If he supported a deal, they would say, look, he's the greatest genius of all time. If he goes to war, they'll be like, oh, they had it coming. And Trump is the preeminent. He is the force. It's the only thing that matters. There is no policy behind it. I made my peace with that long ago. And for many people, talking about the MAGA base wants this or that is honestly bullshit, okay? Like, look, we've had 10 years now at this point. But and this is where, maybe this is very elitist of me, this is why I almost think it doesn't matter. This isn't about popular will. This is, at the end of the day, foreign policy is the most elite of elite concerns. It very rarely ranks in the highest of the priorities, unless a war actually starts. Let's look at the past. The vast majority of the American people supported Iraq. They said later that they didn't, but they did. That's why, though, this is an intra-elite war over foreign policy theory, basically to affect the White House. And unfortunately, that's actually where Israel has the highest strategic advantage, because so much of Washington is basically influenced by Israel, and or they have, the ideology. It's not even just money. It's about like affinity, like the ability, they have all these free junkets over there. People spend time over there. They get to know them. There's this great influence campaign at a soft and a hard level that's been going on for, 80 years now, basically basically since its existence. So you have that.
And there's an ideological belief that Israel is an important strategic interest
right.
for us in
so
the
you
region.
have that, right? That pervades Washington. So all of this, what's happening right now, I actually don't think it has anything to do with MAGA. I really don't. This is not really a Democratic question, small d. This is really a question at the foreign policy elite level, especially because Trump is such a cult of personality that his people will back him no matter what. That's part of this whole like, oh, the MAGA base and all of that will fracture. I think all of those arguments are specious. Really, the way that we should argue about this is this a good idea or a bad idea? That's it. That's purely all that matters, especially when we know that we have this group of voters which will go with him no matter what. Yeah. This does, though, and we'll talk about this in the Tucker segment, put a lot of the people who have an audience who are almost solely, basically comprised of MAGA in a very, very tough position, because a lot of them actually do have genuine beliefs and or principles or philosophies about the way things should be done. And then when they go against and are counter to Donald Trump, you're going to find yourself in a very, very difficult position. This is the difficulty and the conundrum of anybody who is really totally tied to Donald Trump as an identity. And it's part of why when you do have a differing opinion, you, at the end of the day, will always lose. You will lose to Trump and you will lose to the MAGA base, which is really, really unfortunate. Now, there are alternative power centers here. And this is, again, the lesson from the war in Iraq. Barbara Jordan and the people who voted against the war in Iraq in 2003 were villains. They called them treason. They wanted to throw them in jail. They were vindicated in a span of just 3 years. So if you believe what you believe, stand up and say it now. You could be wrong. Listen, the Shah's son could be in power. The Israelis could be totally successful. I'll eat it. Listen, I'd be happy. Honestly, I would be happy if this all ended up well, because it would mean no Americans are dead and the Iranian people are happy. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think I have a lot of evidence to back that up. I don't think they have very much evidence on their side to be able to say that. And so when the time comes and the bill can come due, eventually things will come around. And so America, look, I think they will support this war. Unfortunately, I'm just telling the truth. Most people don't spend their days reading books, or they don't know anything about Libya or Syria. They're like, yeah, something happened there or whatever. But, at the end, you'll come to find that it was a big mistake in the long run.
Last thing, and then we can move on to this bit about the Israelis blocking their own citizens from leaving the country and trying to block our citizens from leaving their country as well. This was actually one of the pieces that was very ominous yesterday. I put A3 up on the screen, and we'll talk more about Tucker in the Tucker block. But Trump yesterday, we had covered, had said that, listen, he was sniping at Tucker and was like, listen, I say what America first is. And unfortunately, he's right about that. And so he went more aggressively at Tucker yesterday evening and said, somebody please explain to kooky Tucker Carlson that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And like that, I mean, the number of MAGA vote, people like Laura Loomer that I've been seeing attacking Tucker, because Trump says, okay, he's in the out group now, that's it. And Tucker has barely even, hasn't really actually even criticized Trump. He's just been mostly doing the whole there's these forces inside the administration that are trying to convince Trump, blah, blah, blah. But the fact that Trump felt the need to effectively excise him from the coalition, I think was also very troubling.
We'll see.
Where things go.
But yeah, I mean, that is a great lesson in terms of how the relationship with Donald Trump works. And that's
Tucker was sitting there next to him at the RNC. They were the best buddies not very long ago.
Yeah,
that's how it works.
Look, a relationship only runs one way. All right, let's get to Israel. Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.